Well, it seems like today more gasoline is poured on the already flaming feud between Donald Trump and Senator Ted Cruz. Short time ago, Trump stepped up his attacks on Cruz. Trump is now threatening to sue Cruz for defamation. But Senator Cruz, he's refusing to back down. So what's the issue? It's this Ted Cruz ad.
Life, marriage, religious liberty, the Second Amendment. We're just one Supreme Court justice away from losing them all.
Would President Trump ban partial birth abortion?
Well, look, I'm very pro-choice.
But you would not ban it?
No.
Or ban partial birth abortion?
No, I would. I am pro-choice in every respect.
We cannot trust Donald Trump with these serious decisions.
And Senator Cruz's reaction to Trump's threat, he says he's going to play that ad more. And the senator even daring Trump to file that threatened lawsuit.
Donald's lawyer sent our campaign a cease and desist letter. And this letter, I will say, having practiced law for many, many years, this letter is one of the most remarkable letters I've ever read. Mr. Trump, you have been threatening frivolous lawsuits for your entire adult life. Even in the annals of frivolous lawsuits, this takes the cake. So, Donald, I would encourage you, if you want to file a lawsuit challenging this ad, claiming it is defamation, file the lawsuit. One of the things I look forward to most of all is deposing Donald Trump. For that particular endeavor, I may well not use outside counsel. I may take the deposition myself. Whether in a deposition or a court of law, getting Donald Trump under oath, under penalty of perjury, answering these questions, well, I'll point out it didn't work out very well for Bill Clinton. Donald Trump does not want to be under oath answering questions about his own record.
Trump, of course, hitting right back.
What this guy Cruz did with Ben Carson was an absolute disgrace. What he did with he stole, it was theft. And then they come out with a voter violation form, which is a fraud, as far as I'm concerned. And what he did with that whole thing was a disgrace. So we're not going to let that stuff happen anymore. I mean, we're not going to let it. We will not let it happen. We're all watching. You're all watching. Keep your eyes wide open. These politicians, here's a guy, he raises the Bible, and yet he tells fibs, he tells lies, and then he does the stuff to Carson, and he does other things very bad. So politicians are bad people. Boy, they are bad. Would you believe it?
And in a statement, Trump blasting Senator Cruz, saying this, quote, he's a liar, and these ads and statements made by Cruz are clearly desperate moves by a guy who is tanking in the polls. Watching his campaign go up in flames finally explains Cruz's logo. Now, later in that same statement, Trump says, if I want to bring a lawsuit, it would be legitimate. Likewise, if I want to bring the lawsuit regarding Senator Cruz being a natural-born Canadian, I will do so. Time will tell, Teddy. End quote. Now you're going to hear straight from both the Trump and Cruz campaigns. The Trump campaign spokesperson is standing by, but first the communications director for the Ted Cruz campaign, Rick Tyler. Good evening, sir.
Hey, Greta, how are you?
Very well. So do you think Donald Trump is going to sue your candidate and your campaign?
I have no idea. I mean, you can't predict what Donald Trump's doing from one day to the next. But, Greta, look at what this campaign has come to. We have Donald Trump, who's threatening lawsuits. We have Marco Rubio, who's claiming talking about false or fake Facebook ads, and then you have Ted Cruz, who's talking about rebuilding the military and pointing conservative justice to the court. So I think the difference is between smear, fear, and lies, and someone who has truth, integrity, and trust on their side. So it's kind of a shame that this is all happening a couple days before this really consequential election that's coming up on Saturday. We're talking about these trivial things.
Well, did some of this, though, start with Iowa? I mean, it was really, I don't know how you explain Iowa, but that whole thing with Dr. Ben Carson, whether it was unfortunate or deliberate or something else, I mean, it really did. I think it was painful to the Carson campaign.
Well, I can explain Iowa. We had 16,000 volunteers on the ground, knocking 10,000 doors a day, making 20,000 phone calls a week. We won Iowa with an army of volunteers, getting our people to the caucuses, and they did come to the caucuses. And by the way, Dr. Carson finished ahead of his poll, ahead of where he did. We did too, and Trump was the only one who finished below his polls.
And, but that way, we still got. But Rick, but I mean, the problem is that there was a statement put out that Ben Carson was leaving the campaign, and please vote for Ted Cruz. No, you don't think that?
There's a state. No,
that he was going to
no
Florida. The implication was.
Right, which was reported by a major competing network of yours, and that was the story. We repeated the exact same story that they said. And by the way, Dr. Carson didn't come to New Hampshire until Friday, so the report was correct. But again, we're arguing about these trivial matters, about Facebook pages, about who's going to sue who over eligibility. I don't think the voters of South Carolina care anything about that. I think what they care about, in particular, is rebuilding the military. And Ted Cruz talked about how he's going to rebuild the military to keep us safe because the Obama administration has gutted it. And yet we're talking about these really silly, nonsensical, pathetic matters.
Do you think that if he does sue, will Senator Ted Cruz really dust off his law books and depose Donald Trump? I mean, because I got to tell you that the videotape of that will be something else.
It sure would be. Well, Donald Trump would have to be his own character witness against himself, because after all, these are his words in the ad that he's suing over. Imagine this. He's suing over defamation, and you're a lawyer, Greta, defamation and libelous statements which are his statements. I mean, it's really fairly remarkable.
Except there is a tort that's really not used very much, and that's called false light. And it does have, that tape was from 1999, and he has been pro-life since then, at least so he says. But you did put it in the upper corner. I got to give that to you. But let me
he gives to Democratic pro-abortion candidates. He did it 2 years ago. He just praised Planned Parenthood on the air. I mean, goodness sake, he's not pro-life.
I'm trying to just break in to give you one. I'm just going to break in to give you one. How about that NBC poll? Do you like it?
I do. I love the poll. We're ahead in national poll. We're ahead of Donald Trump by 2 points. We'll see how it goes. I'm really thrilled about it. Thank you.
All right. I thought I'd give you that one. Anyway, nice to have you join us.
Thanks so much.
And now for the other side of this grisly battle, the national spokesperson for the Trump campaign, Katrina Pearson. Katrina, you've just heard from Rick Tyler. Is Donald Trump likely to sue, or is this just sort of saber rattling?
Well, I think ultimately, Greta, it's going to be up to Mr. Trump. And you know, those ads really, the light is very, very dim, especially considering how they're showing the videos of babies being butchered when Donald Trump has already said that he doesn't support federal funding for Planned Parenthood as long as they're doing abortions. And I think that's pretty disgusting. But this is not unheard of. The campaign manager for Senator Cruz has actually caused a candidate in Missouri to commit suicide over attack ads. So what Mr. Trump is saying is this is the reason why good people don't run for office.
Can we just like dial back on that one? What do you say?
Absolutely. In the state of Missouri, a lieutenant governor candidate committed suicide behind some of the attack ads. And this is ridiculous. You should be able to run for office and put out your message and go to the voters. You shouldn't have to deal with smears and just these outright lies in some of these things. And it's not just Mr. Trump. Marco Rubio even came out. Trey Gowdy was out there talking about the falsehood that the Cruz campaign was putting out about their own campaigns. And you mentioned it first in Iowa with what happened to Ben Carson. The Cruz campaign just said they had 16,000 volunteers, of which all of them could have voted the way the caucus was set up.
I don't have time to deal with the Missouri thing, but I don't want that to go like I didn't hear that. That's not a serious allegation. Sure. But so let me just say we're going to carve that out of this discussion. In the Cruz ad, it said that it actually had the date. That the statement made to Tim Russert was October of 1999. So it was not misleading in that way. I mean, it was definitely, there's no sort of time that was sort of confusing. There was no suggestion, for instance, that was made last week.
So but they are saying that this was happening just last week, and it isn't. They're saying today that Donald Trump supports abortion. They're not saying that he previously supported abortion. They're saying he does today. They're saying he supports partial birth abortion even today, and he doesn't. More importantly, they're saying that Donald Trump is anti-Second Amendment. That's simply not true. Donald Trump has a concealed carry license in the state of New York, an NRA member. His sons go hunting all of the time, and it's just absurd that they're trying to distort Mr. Trump's character this way today.
I will say, I mean, just so that we're clear, is that he has said repeatedly that he is pro-life and pro-Second Amendment in the last few years. I mean, I don't deny that. I'm just sort of sorting through the whole, sort of the legal ramifications of this ad and whether or not, it could ever be considered to be defamation or false light. And obviously, it is now have been threaded into the middle of this political feud that's going on in South Carolina. Did you see the NBC polls? It has Ted Cruz up top national polls, but Quinnipiac has your candidate up nationally. Any thoughts tonight about those polls?
Well, yeah, poll sample matters. I think it was only 400 voters with a margin of error of 2 or 3 points. So they're still within the margin of error with a small sample size. We're not really worried about the national polls. The state polls are what matters. And Donald Trump is still dominating because voters do want to rebuild the military. Voters do want someone that's going to stand up and fight back against the globalists like Goldman Sachs and transnational corporations that have been stealing jobs from Americans. And Donald Trump is that candidate, Greta.
Katrina, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And the on-the-record political panels here, Fortune Magazine's Nina Easton, and from the Washington Examiner, Susan Friccio. Nina, I'm going to give you a question. I'm just going to open the floor to you.
I mean, I don't know where to begin.
Well, that's why I didn't have a question. I didn't have a question for you. It's like,
I mean, Donald Trump clearly, there was a razzle-dazzle element in threatening to sue Ted Cruz, because what he wanted to do was all of us be talking about the lawsuit, not the ad. When I congratulate you for at least playing the ad, because it raises questions over Donald Trump's previous support for partial birth abortion, because he doesn't want us talking about that, so he wants us talking about the lawsuit. And then you have to, when you talk about lawsuits, you know, which was a familiar tool he used in business, you have to start wondering about defamation lawsuits that should be filed by John McCain or Megyn Kelly against Donald Trump. I mean, it's just all so rich. But the thing that's especially rich to me is
there's
going
a difference
after...
but there's a difference between an insult. I mean, like, the insult isn't actionable. I mean, like, you know, that I think you're a dope or something like that is not actionable.
But those were his own words. So that's you know, and,
well, no, actually,
and these are also public figures.
I actually would investigate. I haven't opened the books in a long time, but something called false light. But this, I don't even know if you can get it into a political fight anyway. But
here's the other rich thing is he's going after Ted Cruz, who is, I was just in Texas among people who were not Ted Cruz fans, but knew him as Solicitor General when he was arguing before the Supreme Court. That guy is brilliant, a brilliant lawyer. Whatever you think of him politically, so to go after Ted Cruz is going to be very interesting.
Can I say one thing, having practiced law? Brilliant lawyers. I'm not saying it applies here. Brilliant lawyers can lose cases every day of the week. Anyway, Susan.
And I think actually Cruz probably lost this one in the eyes of the voters, because voters don't care about this. They don't care about people fighting over who's going to sue who. They care about the issues, and they care about the issues in their state. Do you think people in South Carolina really care if Trump sues Cruz and Cruz can launch a really good defense and he can depose him? I mean, that 40-minute diatribe today, I don't think helped him at all.
I don't think it changes anyone's view. Anyone going into this fight who is a Cruz person or a Trump person.
It was a waste of time today.
Yeah. It's like, it is basically something for all of us to chew on.
It was good for reporters. It was entertaining for reporters today, but for voters, I don't even think they paid any attention.
Anyway.